Okay, so this next video lecture is still the continuation of our Module 4 Revenue Cycle. So we will continue with the manual cash receipts processes. So here, customer checks and remittance advices will be received by the mailroom. So there will be a clerk that will prepare a cash pre-list and sends the pre-list and the checks to the cash receipts, and then this cash pre-list will also be sent to the accounts receivable and the controller. Okay, so in the cash receipts department, they will verify the accuracy and completeness of the checks, update the cash receipts journal. They will also be preparing the deposit slip and prepare the journal voucher, and will send and post it to the ledger. So in the accounting receivable department, they will post from the remittance advices to the accounts receivable subsidiary ledger. Periodically, a summary of the postings is sent to the general ledger. So our general ledger department will reconcile this journal voucher from the cash receipts with the summaries from our AR. So they will also update the general ledger accounts, and then the controller will reconcile the bank accounts. So this is in the case where there is segregation of duties, or the different employees handles the journal and ledger, and they have different departments for each of these accounts. Okay, so those are for the manual cash receipts processes. So the second type of assessing your revenue cycle is through the physical systems. Okay, when we say a physical system, usually these are the combination of computer technology and human activities. So this is a mix that creates a continuum of alternative design options. So in this illustration, we will be presenting the AIS functionality and the workflow pattern under the different levels of technology, and also demonstrate how the internal control profile changes as the technology or human mix also changes. So we have here the summary of internal controls, okay, for our physical systems for the revenue cycle. For the control activity, for example, for the transaction authorization, so the sales processing will be for credit check and return policy. Okay, for the cash receipts, remittance list. So this is the use of our cash pre-list, okay, to determine if indeed those were authorized transaction. For the segregation of duties, for the sales processing, credit is separate from processing. Okay, and inventory control also will be separated from the warehouse. The AR subsidiary ledger will also be separated from the general ledger. So meaning if this can be handled by two different persons. Okay. For cash receipts, your cash receipts should be separated from AR and the cash account. And your AR subsidiary ledger will also be separated from the general ledger. Supervision. Okay. In this case, for the cash receipts, the entity should have at least a mailroom for receiving the remittances. For the sales processing, I think once the transaction was authorized, then it can be processed to the different departments. For the accounting records, for the sales processing, sales orders, sales journals, subsidiary ledgers, control ledger, for the accounts receivable, as well as for the inventory, it should be separated, okay, and should have their own records. For the cash receipts, of course, remittance advice, checks, remittance list, cash receipts journal, AR, subsidiary ledger, and control, as well as the cash account should be established. For the access, for sales processing, physical access to inventory, there should be a physical access to inventory for only those authorized personnel, and access for accounting records above will also be given to those who are responsible for it. For the cash receipts, of course, there also should be a physical access Okay, because cash is susceptible to theft. So that's why they have to be very careful about handling cash receipts. That's why supervision, or in terms of supervision, there should be at least a mail room, okay, for the remittance, and separate person should handle the deposit and the records. Okay. And for the independent verification for the sales process, shipping department, billing department, and general ledger. So these are the three departments that are responsible. And for the cash receipts, of course, there should be for someone for cash receipt, general ledger, and bank reconciliation to verify that indeed these are authorized transactions. Authorization of controls. So we have mentioned this before also. So meaning there should be a proper authorization for the transaction, and it should be coupled with documentation. Okay? So meaning only those transactions which are authorized should get processed. Within the revenue cycle, the authorization should take place when a sales is made or it was authorized, a cash refund is requested, meaning in these cases, there should be an authorization for the sale, for the cash refund, posting of cash payment received. Okay, so along with that is a cash pre-list at the same time for it to be authorized. Segregation of functions, so meaning transactions authorization should be separated from those who are processing it. Asset custody should also be separate from those who are recording the transactions, and the organization should also be able to structure that the perpetration of fraud requires collusion between the two or more individuals, meaning they should structure their organization to avoid this perpetration of fraud and collusion between two or more individuals. For the sales order processing, of course, credit authorization, as mentioned earlier, should be separate from those who are processing it. Inventory control should be separate from the warehouse. Accounts receivable subledger, there should be separate responsibility from the general ledger control account. For the cash receipts processing, of course, the cash receipts should be separated from the records, meaning there should be two persons who will handle this separately. Accounts receivable subsidiary ledger should also be separate from the general ledger. For supervision, of course, this is often used when the entity is unable to enact appropriate segregation of duties. Okay, so supervision of employees serves as a deterrent for dishonest actions, and particularly important in the mailroom because they are the ones who are receiving the remittances from our customers. Accounting records, of course, with properly maintained audit trail, it's possible to track the transactions through the system to find out whether there are errors, okay, such as checking the pre-numbered source documents, special journals, subsidiary ledgers, general ledgers, and other files. For the access control, of course, access to assets and information, meaning the accounting record, should be limited. So this should be within the revenue cycle. The asset, of course, should be protected, especially the cash and the inventory. So the access to records such as accounts receivable, subsidiary ledger, and cash journal should be restricted to avoid theft and fraud. Independent verification. So physical procedures as well as record keeping should be independently reviewed, okay, in different points within the system to check if that is accurate and complete. Shipping verifies also that the goods sent from the warehouse should be correct in type and in quantity because there is a source for it, such as the order, customer's order, and other forms or documents. So the warehouse should also reconcile the stock release document, meaning the picking up of the slip and packing slip. Billing should also reconcile the shipping notice, okay, with the sales invoice to make sure that what is ordered is what is to be shipped and billed from the customer. So the general ledger reconciles the general ledger, should reconcile also with the journal vouchers from billing, inventory control, cash receipts, and the AR. So this is how to trail whether these transactions are correctly recorded and authorized. So this is for verification. How about automating the revenue cycle? So authorization and data access can be performed through the computer screens. So there is a decrease in the amount of paper, and the manual journals and ledgers are changed to disk or tape transaction master files. This is to lessen the papers. So input is still typically from hard copy documents and goes through one or more computerized processes. So here the process store date in electronic files, the tape or disk, or these are prepared data in the form of a hard copy report later on. So here, revenue cycle programs can also include formatted screens for collecting the data, to edit, check, or to enter the data, for instruction, for processing, for storing the data, even for security procedures using the password or user IDs. Okay, and of course, the steps for generating and displaying the output should be controlled and maintained. To understand files, one must consider also the record design and layout of the computerized system. So the documents and the files that are used as input sources must contain the data necessary to generate the output reports to be presented. So for the computerized or computer-based accounting system, so of course, this is considered to be a continuum with two extremes, meaning automation, which is the use of technology. Of course, the purpose of this is to improve the efficiency and effectiveness. Okay, and re-engineering, that in this case, it also uses technology to restructure the business processes. Re-engineering is meaning the entity will recreate a program or a system that will fit to their current needs, and later on it can also be changed if it's necessary. Okay, so we have here an example of an automated batch sales. Okay, so we have the different departments, the sales department, the credit, and if you could notice, there is a credit department, a computer department, I mean, that is included. Whereas in the first illustration that we had in the previous video lecture using the data flow diagram, since it's manual, then there is no computer department involved. So since this is automated, so meaning we just added this department to store the data, to process it also, to create an output or report that would be used later on for reporting purposes. Okay, so we just add the computer department as well as the database that stores the necessary information related to our revenue cycle right here. So we also have here an example of the real-time sales order. Okay, so in this case, it shows here that once the transaction takes place, then there will be an automatic updating of our master file and our database. Okay, and generate report at the same time. Okay, so those are just an illustration or example. Again, the entity can have their own design depending on their needs and how they process a particular transaction, which in this case relates to our revenue cycle. So, re-engineering sales order processing using real-time technology. So, for manual procedures and physical documents, they are replaced now by interactive computer terminals for efficiency and effectiveness, and also to make the transaction process more, faster. Okay, so real-time input and output occurs with some master files still being updated using the batches. Okay, but of course, depending on how the entity will process it. So real-time Of course, this is the entry of customer order, print out of stock release, packing slip and bill of lading, update of credit file, inventory file, and open sales or order file. It automatically updates once there is transaction. While for batch processing, this includes print out of invoice, update of closed sales order or in the journal, accounts receivable, and general ledger control account. So in the batch processing, of course, the entity will accumulate a certain number of transactions before they process it altogether. Okay, so what are the advantages of real-time processing? So here, real-time processing will shorten the cash of the firm by reducing the time between the order date and the billing date. Okay, so better inventory management also will be affected, which can also lead to an competitive advantage. Okay, and there will also be fewer clerical errors, reducing incorrect items that is being shipped and billed to the customers. And it will also reduce the amount of expensive paper documents and storage costs. So these are the advantages of the real-time processing. What about for re-engineered cash receipts? So here, of course, the mailroom, this is a frequent target for re-engineering because this is to avoid familiarity and to hasten the internal control to avoid mishandling of cash, okay, or theft or fraud. So companies send their customers printed in envelopes and remittances advice. Upon receipt, these envelopes are scanned to provide control procedure against theft, and the machines will open the envelope, scan the remittance advice, and check and will separate them. So artificial intelligence may be used to read handwriting such as remittance and amounts and signatures. So of course, this will be, I think, applicable for those highly sophisticated company or organization which can afford to install this type of technology, because it will require a lot or a huge amount of capital, I think. Okay, but this is an ideal internal control to prevent fraud or theft. What about point of sale systems or POS? So POS are used extensively in our retail establishment. So here, customers pick the inventory from the shelves, like for example in a grocery store or department store, and the customer will take them to the cashier. And then the clerk will scan the Universal Product Code or UPC, and then the POS system is connected to an inventory file master database or master file where the price and the description will be retrieved, and the inventory levels are updated once this UPC are scanned. Okay, and then it will also update the records and inform, okay, or pop a certain message where reorder are needed already, okay, or meaning reorder point needs can immediately be detected. So the system computes the amount that is due, and then payment is either cash, check, or ATM, or even credit card in most cases. So there are no accounts receivable and POS. If checks, ATM, or credit cards are used, there will be an online link to receive the approval if that is authorized. At the end of the day, a cashier's shift, the money and receipts in the drawer are reconciled to the internal cash register tape or a printout from the computer's database. So if there are any cash over or under, it must be recorded. So this is how internal control is imposed in a POS. Okay. So we have here an example also of an automated cash receipt. Okay, so here again, we can see that there is mail room, cash receipts, accounts receivable, and the data processing. Okay, which automation which automation of this process takes place. Okay, so there are databases also. For the computerized POS, so as explained earlier, so there is computer operations that involves here. They also have the treasury, okay, of course, that is for controlling the transactions that was scanned using the POS. Okay, so those are our illustration. And for the re-engineering using the electronic data interchange or EDI. So EDI, this helps to expedite the transaction, meaning it makes the transaction more efficient and faster. So the customer's computer determined that inventory is needed, selects a supplier with whom the business has formal business agreement with, and they will dial the supplier's computer and places the order, meaning all of this will be on an electronic based transaction. So if the computer determined that the level of inventory needs reordering, so they will select the supplier in which it will be bought, and then it will dial the supplier automatically to place the order. So the exchange is completely automated, and there is no human intervention here or management is needed. This is automatic because there is some prerequisite that needs to be satisfied before such can go through or can be processed. So we have here the EDI system. So for example, company A, so they purchase in their application software, there is purchase system, and then it will be translated to software, and then there will also be a translation software and communication software. So they will have the direct connection with the company B, which is our seller. Okay, so there will be sales order system. They also have this translation software, communications. Okay, and then here, through the van, the mail order and the order, will take place, and the exchange of needed information or data will be considered. So that's how it is in the EDI system. Okay, so for our re-engineering using the internet, so typically no formal business agreements that exist here. So they do the EDI, meaning this is already automatic. Okay, so most orders are made with credit cards and mainly done with email systems, and thus a turnaround time is necessary. So intelligent agents are needed to eliminate this time lag, okay, to expedite the process. And of course, security and control over data is a concern with the internet transactions, because we all know that there are a lot of hackers out there that will take some of the personal data, especially related to the financial data of those persons who are engaged in transacting the internet. So you have to be very careful as well. For the computer-based accounting system control consideration, so of course we must always remember this authorization. So in real-time system, authorizations are automated. Program decisions rules must be closely monitored, therefore, because in this case, most of the transactions doesn't need human intervention or interaction. Segregation of functions. So here, consolidation of tasks by the computer is common. So therefore, protection of computer program is necessary. So there should be the coding, processing, and maintenance should be separated by the different employees. Supervision. In a POS system, the cash register's internal tape of database should be added should be an added form of supervision. For access control, magnetic records are vulnerable for both authorized and unauthorized exposure, and therefore it should be protected. So there must be limited file accessibility, and computer programs should be safeguarded and monitored from time to time. Accounts or accounting records, of course, this rests on reliability and security of stored digitalized data needs to ensure the backups of all the files are continually kept. So it should be monitored and checked, of course, because the transaction that goes through the electronic form will automatically update our accounting records as well. So for independent verification, consolidating accounting tasks under one computer program can remove traditional independent verification controls. So this is a problem. So to counter this problem, there should be a performance of batch control balancing after each run to make sure that those transactions that are processed are authorized and follow certain guidelines and rules. So to produce also the management reports and summaries for the end users to review for verification. Okay, so those are for our physical system for the revenue cycle.